good morning, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on a slightly pre-solstice gardening video catch-up. And as we are at the point of the summer solstice, which means we're basically halfway through the season, as of right now you basically have 90 days to grow your crop. I'm thinking September the 15th is pretty much in the area. Between the 1st and the 15th is our frost area. And so you need to get things done, and we're getting very close to that basically last chance date when you can plant. Anyway, we're going to take a little walk around the garden, and this is pretty much about a month after I planted. And so you get some kind of idea of what your garden should be looking like, how big the plants should be, and so let's go off and take a little quick look around. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Having a greenhouse makes a huge difference. These are, I believe, Grandpa's lettuce. Doing very, very well. I've been eating some of these already. And got a little bumblebee there come around to check things out. These are the tomato plants. And as you can see down here, the first flowers are starting to come out. These are just a regular table tomato, and these are my beefsteak tomatoes. Now, I don't know if you remember how small they were when they first got put in, but you can see they've grown. They're probably eight times the size of the seedling that I put in about a month ago. And of course, this is the first really nice little spell of warm weather we've been getting. Up until now it has been not cold, but it's been cool and wet. Unfortunately, I had to cut the grapevine back because basically we had such a weird winter. I guess it just didn't stand, but I had to cut it back to here. So we'll see what happens this year. The red lettuce is also doing really nice. I've been eating those too. You know, lettuce makes a great sandwich. No matter what you're eating, throw some lettuce on there. This is my first crop of beets. I just replanted some beets in a newly built raised bed. And of course the beans are just starting to come on now. I don't know if you remember, I had to replant all of these beans. That's why they're a little smaller than this row of beans here. And this poor little grapevine here, it did even worse than the other one. So here's hoping. Pepper plants, and of course the basil. These are the potatoes. I haven't seen many potato bugs this year. I have been checking. But I find that if you plant late, and again these have only been in about a month, you miss the potato bug cycle. It's been kind of interesting how you can do that. And I haven't lost any potatoes from the crop either, you know, just because it's been a bit behind. This is the row that I replanted the other day. They're all coming up nicely. Yeah, I'm going to keep this little baby here. This is a Scotch thistle, and this will have the most beautiful purple flowers on it when it's full grown. Onions. Yeah, I just got down to cleaning the driveway, got all the weeds out. I find I do this once a year, just as they're about to go into seed, and I get rid of them all, and now that'll stay pretty clear for the rest of the season. The cherry tree seems to have settled in okay. Got a few cherries there. And the raspberry plants seem to have taken. Now, one of the things I would like to point out here, that something I like to try and do is have a complete ecosystem within my garden, and so I encourage this kind of shrubbery, fairly dense there. It provides shade for animals, it provides nesting area for birds. Yeah, I just find that when you have all of the birds, animals and insects that you find in nature all cooperating and working together, the whole garden just seems to, I don't know, it just seems to work. Anyway, this is the project today. This, by the end of the day, or early tomorrow, will be a redone raised bed right here, and I'm going to take some photographs of that in progress. But that will tidy up this little bit. Now, it's really interesting here. This is I'm basically inoculating my gardens with hot mustard, and these are beds I've had a little bit of trouble with, but you can see where the mustard hasn't really grown or come on very strong. Like, these seeds were all planted at the same time, and none of them are really doing incredibly well. You know, they should be maybe twice as high as that again, but that tells me that there is an issue with this soil, and especially where the mustard has not come on at all. So I will be doing a double treatment this year. As soon as these come into flower, and they're just starting to do that, I usually cut this stuff up with a machete and churn it into the soil, and I will immediately replant. And of course, you have to make sure that you have an abundant water supply. I have about maybe 500 gallons on the property at all time. I collect the water from my eaves trough, and again, this is because you don't know where the weather is going to go. If we're flooding, if we get heavy rains, the raised beds will allow that soil to drain, because although plants like water, not really too many plants like to have a completely wet foot, and this is a problem with planting in the ground. Whereas with the raised bed, like I say, these will drain off, and if it's dry, well, I'll show you a raised bed I've got taken down up in the other end of the garden, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So we have two kinds of kale here. This stuff is Russian kale, and this is white kale. So two nice different varieties of kale to chew down on. And these here are my radishes. Won't be long, we'll be eating some radishes. This bed I just planted carrots in. 4 rows of carrots, 2 rows of multicolored, and 2 rows of regular carrots. Now with carrots, that's another great thing about raised beds, is because once you churn up this soil and loosen it all up, it tends to stay fairly loose, because, you know, I've actually seen situations where you plant carrots at ground level, and even where you're walking past the bed is enough to push the carrots and make them go at a bit of an angle. This is more Jersey cabbage that someone gave to me. They had a bunch of seedlings that were a little bit leggy, and so I've transplanted them, and we'll see how they do. In Jersey, they take 2 years. They leave them over winter, and they come back in the following spring because it's mild enough. But here it's a different story. You've really got to get this happening in one single season. Yeah, these are strawberries. They're looking nice and healthy, and we've actually got some strawberries now. and we'll be eating those very, very shortly. This is an ever-bearing variety, and I just let them run like this to reproduce. They do it quite successfully, all by themselves. And so out of these few plants, like I say, which I've basically been weeding them out. There are certain plants, for some reason, are resistant to Fusarium, and so I kept the ones that were resistant and replanted those and spread those, and out of that has come this crop of strawberry plants. So I hope to keep propagating those. This of course is bee balm and chives, and the peas are just starting to flower out. I'll be picking some peas very, very shortly. Now what I do with my onions, I always find a secondary spot for onions, so I'll leave the large bed, the large single bed, to mature into full size onions. Onion, you know, for sandwiches, that kind of stuff, because yeah, I want to have a crop that's going to last through the winter. And that is another thing that you have to consider when you're doing a survival garden, is that not only do I have to get a crop of peas for myself, I have to have enough peas that I can make a seed crop for next year. So really the potatoes that I've got up there, I should really have double the size so I can actually eat potatoes all during the year. There might be a short gap, you know, in May or June when I'm not eating potatoes, but the new crop will be coming on by then. Here is the garlic, doing really well, and I don't seem to be getting bothered by leek moth as much this year. I think that the cold winter, we had some really cold days this winter, and I think that it killed off a lot of the adults that basically overwinter in the soil. And that's why we actually have the leek moth now in southern Ontario, is because the winters have been so mild that this pest has been managing to overwinter in large numbers. And there goes my good crop of nettles. Now this is a new plant, these are not quite coming up. This is cilantro, and I wanted a next crop because, you know, it goes pretty quickly, and I tend to give quite a bit of stuff away. Swiss chard over there I've just put in, chocolate mint, regular mint, this is all the dill, and there you go, you can see this is the first crop of cilantro, and it's coming on quite strongly now, but you know, another 3 weeks that'll be done, it'll be going to seed. This is what I wanted to show you about the raised bed. As you can see, this is getting ready to be rebuilt, but the top now, we've had a few dry days and you can see that top is looking quite dry, but as you go further and further down, you can see starting about here it's getting more moist, and as you go down to where the wood layer is, that's where all the moisture will be stored like a sponge. So now this is all layered, and last year, before it fell apart in the springtime, I did do a hay treatment. So where this hay is here, from here down is wood, and you can see some of the edges of the wood right there. That is oak and maple slab. And so there's quite a bit of wood, there's probably about a foot, and I dug down actually below the soil level that you see on the edge here, and so there is quite a bit of wood, maybe a foot or a foot and a half of wood, and that goes right the way across. You can see the ends of the wood, and this is some of the stuff that I dug up whilst I was clearing away that edge to get ready to put the boards around, and this will be finished probably this weekend, and then I can plant. Okay, this is turnip, and you can just see it's just starting to poke its head through. I just finished this raised bed about a week and a half ago, and you can see what a difference. You can see it's a lot more solid than the one next to it. Now I have made this slightly small. I took 6 inches off. Instead of 4 feet, I made it 3.5 feet, because that is a nice workable area. And another big thing that I found when I did the other raised beds, I didn't put this centerpiece in, and you know what happens, there is so much pressure from the soil on these boards. That's one of the reasons that they start to burst out at the ends, because there's nothing to lock them in the center here. And so that is one big change and one big lesson that I've learnt with the raised beds. Now this is my second planting of beets, and you can see they're just poking their heads through the soil. The raspberries are all coming into flower, and one of the things I've really noticed this year, even more so than other years, is the lack of pollinators. We've had a good crop of mosquitoes, there's no doubt about that, with all the wet weather and standing water, but other than that, even hornets, I'm not seeing a lot of hornets this year. There's some bumblebees, but boy oh boy oh boy, we are losing our pollinators like crazy. Not even flies. Not even flies. They'll soon be bursting out. It's kind of interesting how they do this. Some onions divide in the ground, and others put these little pods at the top of their stems, and you'll see that will grow into a whole bunch of onion cloves ready for planting next year. Some more Jersey cabbage, and there are the beans. I don't know if you remember these, I had to replant this row because the peas didn't come up in this row. Anyway, the beans have done well, they're all coming up. And as you can see, my neighbour has really cleaned up his backyard. We have a new owner next door, and he is doing a great job of keeping this property in good shape. But again, you see, I like this little thicket. It's a big jumble and tumble of trees in there, and bushes and shrubs. This is a great nesting area for birds, and it's a nice shady area for chipmunks and squirrels and mice and other small rodents to live and to hide out. And as I say, all of these things work together to make a complete ecosystem. And as I say, I saw a little documentary, and it was about the North Atlantic cod and the decline of the cod stocks. And what they discovered in their researches was that the cod actually depends on 40 other species to be healthy in their environment for the cod to really thrive. So everything is interdependent on this planet, and of course we in the past never realized a lot of those big connections. People thought they were just fishing the cod, or that the stocks had diminished and that they were only looking at the cod issue, and they weren't looking at all the other possibilities that it could be. Now I just replanted this bed with mustard seed, and again, this process that I'm going through right now, this is prepping up for the weather that is to come, because it's going to be tough, my friends. I'm hearing possibly a doubling or tripling of food prices by the time we get to the end of the year. This here is horseradish. Yeah, it doesn't take long for the grass and the weeds to grow in. It'd be nice to get this tidied up. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little tour around the garden and the quick update as we close in on the summer solstice. And as I say, some of the weather reports that I've been reading and the polarization of the weather, the amount of rainfall that they are getting in the Midwest in the USA, the cold temperatures in Europe, especially Northern Europe, snow in June. It's unbelievable what is going on right now, and I think this is go time. And you have to think ahead with the garden. You have to start thinking of where to place your beds, where the sun is going to come from, how you're going to water them, what it's going to look like when they're grown, can you access them There's so many little questions that you have to just think out before you actually put your garden in. But this is the time to be doing it. I would suggest starting right away this summer, even if you're planning just the building right now in preparation for next year. If you can't do raised beds and you want to go onto your lawn, I would suggest you get some black plastic, some thicker black plastic, and lay that down and just peg that out on the lawn, and it will burn your grass off, and you can turn it over, you won't get overrun with grass, and it will also put a ton of organic matter back into the soil, so you don't have to lose any of your precious topsoil, and work from there. And once you've got your patch going, you can maybe put some raised beds in. I highly recommend raised beds, and I highly recommend hugelkultur, because it really does help balance out the extremes in nature. It'll help in the dry weather, and it will help in the wet weather. Okay, and of course, next step, if you can, you don't have to have an elaborate greenhouse like I built for myself, but certainly think about putting some plastic hoops over your raised beds or over your garden. You need to be able to think about covering quickly should there be a frost. And so that's my next little purchase, will be some bales of straw and hay, and that'll be just sitting there in case I need to cover very, very quickly with a layer of straw to prevent frost damage. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative, and if you did, please like, comment and subscribe below, and also please share. The way the YouTube algorithms are working, my videos are not getting shared the same way they used to, so it really does help if you subscribe, if you like, and you share this video with your friends, and come along on this journey, this adventure into the grand solar minimum. I recommend you go to Adapt 2030 as a channel on YouTube. Brilliant information. David Dubine is a fantastic researcher, and also the Ice Age Farmer I've just discovered, and he is also bringing some brilliant information that you're not receiving on the mainstream media. Okay, so in the meantime, this is Hound Dog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant day, and next time we talk, that raised bed should be finished. You take care now. See ya. Bye.